Thanks for attending another Lightning Design Review. I'm Lincoln Anderson with 352 Media Group, and let's get started looking at some Windows Phone app designs. I see some familiar names in the attendee list, so hope you find this to be helpful. First app we're going to look at is called Traks, and this is a playlist building app for music, but it's unique because it's, instead of having the user put together a track song by song, you give it some specifics about what kind of tempo you want over the course of time, and it'll pick tracks for you. So if you're jogging and you want to start out slow and then amp up the energy, you can kind of specify that. So I want to take a look at the navigation map for this app first, because I think this is really well. This is something I recommend everybody do, even if your app is pretty simple. One of the things that is really nice about this app flow is that the developer highlighted pages that are reused in multiple scenarios, and it's something that you may not think about too much if you're just developing page by page. When you see the larger picture like this, you see how interfaces are going to be perceived in different flows, and how you might need to change the interface a little bit, or change some labeling here and there that's contextual to whatever flow the user's in. So this all looks pretty good. Diving into the app, first screen I wanted to look at is, this is just the main pivot. You can see recent track lists. And what struck me originally was that when I first saw this, I thought that the title of each track list should be bigger, because that's kind of the identifying characteristic, and maybe the duration of time should be smaller. But now that I've learned a little bit more about the app, I think that the way the developer's done it is really smart, because they're showing a thumbnail of the tracks. It's beats per minute, but you can kind of think of it as tempo, or the energy of the music over time. And you can see how it's that's even more of an identifier. The fact that you're using that for jogging or driving, that's kind of useful. But being able to actually see the graph of the energy over time is really the key identifier. So how long it's going to take. You might say, I need 45 minutes of something that starts out moderate and then slows down. The fact that you use that for your commute is, it's interesting for reference, but the time and the visual are more important. So I think this is pretty good. The only thing that I might suggest is off to the right, you've got for each track the number of times it's been played, and I think the star is how many of your favorite songs are in there. And that's useful information. I don't know that it's as important as the time itself. So if you wanted to, you could use a little bit more of a subtle font there, make the duration of the track a little bit larger. Maybe just, drop it down into a second line, so you have 3 lines. I think what you have right now is really clean, so I don't want to mess with that too much. But I was just kind of thinking when I first saw it that, it was that, like looking at the first item, 0 hours, 25 minutes, arrow 19, those were somehow associated together. Maybe it's just because there wasn't enough of a gap between the icon and the time or something like that, but just kind of visually distinguishing those extra statistics about it to say that those are not quite as important as the duration of time, I think would be good. Oh, the other really random comment about this was that down on the bottom there were 2 app bar icons, and I think those are a little bit smaller than how the app bar will actually look when you go to build this out. So you might not have as much screen real estate as you think you do when you're building this. But looking at the app bar, it's recommended that you have an odd number of app bar buttons in your bar, which is kind of an odd suggestion, because if you have 2 commands, like, okay, do I just make up a third one? I don't know. But if you find yourself as you're architecting an app thinking, well, I can use these 2 app bar buttons. Maybe this other third one belongs there, but I'm not sure. Aesthetically, if it's just kind of a toss-up, aesthetically an odd number will look better. It's just because you have an app bar button in the middle, and so the symmetry looks a little nicer. Moving on to this page where you actually edit the track list, or edit the set. You can see this is a really unique interface where you're specifying how long the set is. You're doing that with a slider. I think that makes sense. There must be a minimum I guess a minimum of 0 and then maybe a maximum of 3 hours or something like that. So, but I think that's pretty clear. You're just sliding and that number is updating. If you look at the title of this page where it says Edit Set, I think if you're using an actual one of the template styles, I think that's going to be a little bit larger of a text size. The only reason I mention that is because right now that title, the Edit Set, is kind of getting lost in the interface. I think it's the same size or maybe even a little smaller than some of the subheadings being used in the page itself. So it's just kind of getting lost a little bit if you're, if the title is just kind of giving you a context of what are you doing on this screen. So you don't want that to get lost. If we look down now at beats per minute, so the way this works is you can tap on any one of the gray circles on the right, and for each column you can dictate if you want a low or a medium or a high beats per minute. And so it's kind of like you're drawing a graph over time. On the left side, you can see how there's a little infinity symbol, and if you tap on any one of those circles, it'll apply that to the entire time segment. And that's just kind of a shortcut, so you don't have to tap every one of the circles. I think this makes a lot of sense. I was thinking about different ways of putting the label 180, 150, 100 on the left, and maybe putting the cell on the right. But I honestly, I think that the way that it's set up right now makes a lot of sense. I think that the reason it stuck out to me, and I was a little confused looking at it at first, was that the very first option that you see is the select all and the labeling. So just kind of looking left to right, like the way that we read, it's a little bit to process that kind of stuff, and before you get to what is probably going to be 80% of the use case on this page, which is tapping on that grid that's on the right side. So I might think about just kind of flipping the layout that you have left to right here, but I think playing around with it a little bit, the user is going to understand how it works. Down below, the style, this one really confused me, and I asked the developer about different ways that we could architect this style section, and really my questions were more about how it works. What do the icons mean, and what does the blue mean versus the empty circle versus the gray circle? So he cleared it up for me, and basically it's a 3-state toggle. So solid gray means that you don't care about, it's kind of the intermediary state. And you can think of the blue as like the checked or the on or the yes state, and then the empty black is like no, I don't want that. What these are all referring to are the style of the music. So the first icon is a little person, that refers to vocals. The second icon is a lightning bolt, and that refers to the energy. I think it's like a high energy characteristic of the song. So as opposed to beats per minute, these are more just characteristics in general, or styles. First of all, I think that the person icon, if that had been like a mouth or some sort of icon of someone singing, I think that would have been a little bit clearer. Maybe maybe a microphone, and that might be confusing with like a recording mechanism or something. But just the person, the profile icon, wasn't immediately clear to me. When you're looking at the individual states, that 3-state toggle, that really wasn't clear to me at all. And I think that, up above we're using gray as sort of the off state, and then the color is the on state. So it's very clear. There's only 2 states. There's not a lot of room for confusion. Down below, because there's 3, there's a struggle. How do we represent all of this? I think that the best way is probably where you have the empty circle here, something that more so represents off, or that you've opted out of it. So maybe even just having a line through the circle, almost like what's over like a no smoking sign, that really represents more that you've chosen a off state for that. And then for the on state, you could keep blue, but I would recommend having like a little check mark icon. I think that would more represent like a filled checkbox, or that you've selected it. So yeah, I think with just a handful of tweaks there, that makes a lot of sense. I think also what was confusing for me about it was on the select all buttons on the left side of the screen. I can see that for the, let's say, the high energy toggle, that's blue, which represents on that I've selected, I want that across the board, but on the right side, it's not. It's actually not blue across the board. So it's kind of weird to have a state on that side of the interface. It makes sense as they are buttons to actually perform a command, but I don't know that if it's appropriate for those to have a state themselves on the left. The final thing I'll comment on this page is track excerpt length. I didn't know what that was either. I had to ask the designer, and it's basically what's the minimum amount of time that you want to cut out of a song, and just kind of crop the song and fit it into your track list. And I think that was a good explanation from the developer. I just think the word minimum, I think that really makes it clear that you're not necessarily forcing every song to be 3 minutes, but it's more of just like a minimum length. So minimum track length, minimum excerpt length, whatever that might be, would be a little clearer. Moving into the next page, this is sort of to get your track list going. You choose from your music what tracks you'd prefer to have in the mix. So you can see I'm Feeling Lucky is sort of a random. All Stars is sort of your favorites, songs you listen to a lot. And then down below we see Not Played Recently, Rarely Played, and Never Played. And so I was a little thrown by the screen at first because the labeling is right on. The labeling's spot on. If I read each individual section, I understand what it means. But the difference, the very slight difference in the colors and the very slight difference in the sizes of the buttons, that threw me a little bit. I think what's going on here is that the designer wants to use the icons in that bright blue color to say, I'm Feeling Lucky and All Stars. Those are really important. Those are the really popular options. Those are the ones that we kind of recommend. Or and then down below with Not Played Recently, Rarely Played, Never Played, those are more like states. I feel like they should be grouped together. They're like characteristics of how recently the song was played. So I almost feel like if the I'm Feeling Lucky and All Stars, those were big and blue, and then there was just a little bit more of a separation, and then maybe some sort of an icon or a title even for that lower section that's like, you could even say, want to hear some songs you haven't heard in a while? Or something, some sort of title for that section, just something that sets it off and says, hey, these 3 buttons they're kind of a group, and they're kind of related to each other. I think the developers kind of used a very subtle shading of the colors to represent that. It's almost like it gets a little bit more dim the older you have to go for that song being played. But I wonder if just using iconography or something might be a little bit more clear. There's lots of shades of blue going on here, so it's just not immediately apparent. This is the track list. This is once you've actually set up a track, you might want to play it again or something. So here's where you can actually see what songs are in it. And I think this looks great. The only question I had for the developer was, why is the commute blue? And he explained that was to set the title off a little bit, because here you're looking at the commute track. That's what the user's named it, is commute. And he just wanted to kind of like set it off and highlight it a little bit more. I don't really know that that's necessary. I think, you're here, again, I think all these titles could be a little bit bigger. And I think when you go to actually build it out, if you use the templates, they will be. But, a big heading across the page that says commute track list, that's pretty obvious. I don't think you need to highlight it. It can be confusing if you think that, what I thought immediately, just because I have kind of a web background, was that it was like supposed to be a hyperlink just because it's blue. Usually blue text, on the web is something you can click on. So that's a little confusing because typically titles and labels, like a page title is not an interactive element unless it's like in a pivot and it's another page you can select or something. But so that was kind of, it made me question, is that thing tappable? Does this do something? I'm not really sure. So I think you're good to just simplify that and take the color out. Second app that we're going to look at is Diet and Social Club. This is basically an app to help people keep track of weight loss. So looking at the splash page for this app, I think this is pretty nice. It's a highly graphical splash page. But what's really done well on it is that the colors are complementary. You can see there's some colors like the flesh tone from the hand is also used in the logo, so it feels unified. Also, more importantly than anything, the text is really clear and really easy to read. There's no question about what the name of this app is. So I think that's pretty strong. So this is kind of like this silk screen kind of illustrated look. It's got almost like this 1950s or 60s kind of look to it. So it's got kind of a unique style. And so the challenge for the designer on this app is to make it obvious what elements are interactive. So if you look at a page like this is a challenge because it almost just looks like another splash page. It's got the most dominant element on here is an illustration. And then the other elements even look illustrated as well. It almost looks more like a movie poster than an interactive element. I think some ways to maybe make this a little bit more clear that me and my on the top and the club on the bottom, those are actual buttons. Those are actually things you can tap on. I think what might help is to use a little bit of iconography on those, or what I think might even be a better idea would be when you tap on me and my, you're going to start to see maybe some stats about your data that you've entered and your history, and providing a little bit of a peek into that on this page could be useful. So you can imagine if the coffee cup illustration was maybe a little bit smaller, or maybe was some other kind of illustration, there was a little bit more room to take some more of the information that's deeper in the app and present it. I think you can still keep the unique style you're going for, but also, give a little bit of a hint to the user that these options, these arrows, are going to lead you deeper in to other sections of the application. Diving in, there's a couple of visual metaphors that this app uses. One is that you can package up fat. I guess it's kind of like you're packaging it up and throwing it away. And the next one, I'll just go to the next screen. The other one, you can keep track of how your calorie burn. And I think it's basically like these are little batteries. They represent 100 calories, and you can drag them around to say that you've spent a certain number of calories. So a couple comments on this. It's a really unique interface, to be having sort of this metaphor of these physical objects that you're dragging around. So first comment I'll make about it is that in the beginning of this application, there was this really kind of, retro 50s or 60s silkscreen, and here it almost looks like a product out of an e-commerce catalog in modern day. So it's a little bit discontinuous there. I might recommend that you go for something a little bit stylized on these pages if you're going to go with this visual metaphor. So I'll just hop over to this is a site that I use a lot for stock photography, but you can shop around anywhere. So these are some isometric boxes. Isometric is sort of like a 3D perspective, but it's taken from an angle where you don't get like the perspective line skews. So it looks a little bit more iconic. So that term isometric might be useful for some people. It also is great for inspiration for creating icons. If you don't have $25 to spend on a graphic like this, but you have some graphics skills yourself, you can browse around on a site like this and be inspired to find something that better fits your style. Here's another example. These are a set of batteries that are of a similar style, very simple shading. They're very clean, and I think that would better fit with kind of the look that you're going for. Jumping back in Tation, I think the other challenge with this kind of interface is if I'm understanding the interaction correctly, that you're actually dragging these items around to actually make that obvious for the user. So sometimes that's appropriate with an explanation or a demo animation. Other times, you're using a lot of arrows and arrows in this app, and it might be useful to use to use arrows to give a hint of what you can actually move around in the app. Here they're mostly being just used as buttons, but if they were kind of to hint to the user that you can slide an object in a drag and drop it in a certain direction, that might be more useful. What we're going to look at is called the Zen of Rock, Paper, Scissors. So on the surface, this is just a rock, paper, scissors, and you can invite friends and play with it, but it's part of a larger game that the developer is building. Right now, we're just going to focus on this rock, paper, scissors portion of the app. This is a splash screen for the app. I think it's got clearly some personality and a unique identity. I was concerned about the word paper down below not contrasting well enough with the red on my screen back in my office. It was really hard to read. It was more of like a beige on red, and so it just didn't read very well. As we get into the app, you'll see that red and yellow are themes throughout this app, and they're really bold colors. There's a lot of high contrast. So this screen, I think maybe if the word paper was yellow or something, I think it would help carry that through. The other thing I was just going to suggest, and this is really just kind of up to the designer, is that as we get into the app, you're going to see how the colors are really bold, and there's some for the actual rock and the paper and the scissors. So there's some bold black iconography, these illustrations that are used. And I wonder if this character, this little guy, is appropriate for that. I think you could use maybe silhouettes of actual monks doing things, meditating or kicking or something like that, and crop those artistically and keep that really powerful boldness throughout that app. The cartoon character just kind of softens it up a little bit, and it's kind of a weird contrast at times. So we'll dive in a little bit so you can tell what I'm talking about. So, again, here, everything's really clear, bright colors, high contrast. This is just where you can see what games are currently running. Down at the bottom, you can see there's instruction to shake the phone to invite a friend. So this is just kind of, you would shake the phone back and forth, and that would initiate inviting someone. I wondered if when you have like a unique interaction like that, sometimes it's a novelty, and some people, that's how they prefer to actually use the phone. It's a game, and that's how they want to have fun with it. Having to do that every time might turn into kind of a chore once the novelty's gone a little bit. So I might, since that yellow bar is kind of in this section where you have the app bar, I would maybe include, you could make the text a little bit smaller and include a circle button. Still doesn't, if you wanted to not do the traditional app bar where it's just a button by itself, still include a circle button of maybe the shaking of the phone, or like a profile, like a portrait of a person with a plus sign, so that if the user wants to just tap on it and they don't want to shake it back and forth, they can. And they just have an option to use either one of those interactions. So the next screen is actual playing of the rock, paper, scissors game. Rock, paper, scissors is a very basic game, so this is a very basic interface. I think it's totally appropriate. So similar comment about this one. Tilting the phone back and forth is I think how you would choose rock, paper, scissors. You would tilt it and it would go to rock, and you tilt it again and it would go to paper. So a couple comments about this. I would recommend maybe having a little bit of the rock and the paper icons off to the side, kind of peeking in a little bit, so you can kind of tell that they're off to the side a little bit. And then I would also enable a swiping, similar to what you would do in a panorama or a pivot, but just keep the icons, keep it clean like you have it, but enable the user to also just swipe left or right between those options. So if they decide that they don't want to use the shaking or the tilting, it's there, and they understand visually that those options are just off the screen a little bit, and just a swipe would get to them. So the next screen is the statistics screen. This is just where you can see how many times you've won and lost, and you can see your world rank. I think this is really clear. Again, just that the comment about the character. I'm just imagining, what if it was like a silk screen look of like just a black and white illustration of like of two eyes just intensely looking over in that gap right there. I think you can carry the same kind of boldness that you have in the color scheme through with the character as well. The other thing was that the biggest word on here is Zen, and then it says world rank, and then the number of what your rank is actually really small. So I wondered if that section in the top center could be redone a little bit, where maybe the most important thing on this screen is the number. Like, I want to know how I rank in the world. I want to see that, maybe I'm checking the screen every time I play to see it, whether it's going up or not. So I might make the number really big and put it in that red area, and then put the label world rank underneath that. And then maybe, if Zen is sort of the title of this whole area, this your stats and your performance represent your Zen or something, you can incorporate that into the area up top with the illustration. Just some ideas there, but I think this is a really clean layout. The last app, I think it's the last app we're going to look at today, is called Jot. And so this is an app where there'll be a picture, and I believe their user submitted photos, and people can, it's basically a contest for people to write a caption for the photos. And, and then whoever has the best caption wins, I guess. This is a splash screen for this app. I thought this was really clever because it's the pencil icon that you see in a lot of places, and I think it's part of the Seago font set, but it's actually flipped around, and so it's sort of like two people writing on the same surface, and they're sort of competing. To me, that's what it represents. So I think it's really appropriate for how this app works. This is the first screen that you would see where you see the open matches. You see a preview of each one of the photos, and then you see a number for how many captions have been written for it so far. And I think this is really clean. I mean, you just focused exactly on what is important about this app, is just the photos and the activity on them. I wasn't sure if the number meant the number of captions that have been written total, or the new captions that have been written since the last time you opened the app. So, excuse me, I might make that a little bit more clear. I'm not quite sure how to do it, other than, you could include like a star icon to represent new. But I mean, this is really kind of nitpicky. I think this app's pretty clean. Oh, one more comment was that on the middle tile, the larger one is featured. That makes sense. I always, whenever I see something featured in an interface, I want to know why it's featured. Is it because it's popular, it has a lot of activity recently, or is it because the author of the app decided that it was important for some reason? So if that flag, if it means popular, I would just say popular. If it means that it's has a lot of activity on it, you can say hot, that sort of thing. And actually, in that light, you could have multiple states, multiple labels for different reasons that you would want to highlight a particular piece of content. And once you choose one of these photos, you can write about it yourself. Again, I think this app's really clean. It's straight to the point. I don't have a lot to say about it, other than on the top, the photo, you can, in scenarios like this, you can make the photo extend all the way to the edges, the top and the left and the right of the app. It just gives it a little bit more of a panoramic feeling, and it makes it feel not so boxed in. I think with some of these photos, that's important because they're artistically done, and you just kind of want to maximize your viewing experience on it. So looking at the screen, you can see that's exactly what the developer has done on this screen, is actually used it as sort of this banner across the top. And so this is the screen where you can see what kind of activity is taking place on the app. I would recommend, I think this is probably just a comp right now, so user 1, user 2, user 3. I would recommend, if this is indeed as a comp, actually putting in usernames or people's first names or something on there. So this is a little bit more clear to whoever's judging it, that it's a community-based thing. It's not just kind of like an anonymous, or maybe it is anonymous. I don't know. So the other comment about the screen was that I'm looking at, let's just take user 1 and user 2 for a second. User 1 it's a black tile, and then it's got a little red square on it with an X. And user 2 is all blue. So I think, and then that sort of pattern is used throughout this interface. So I think there's two states. There's a state where the user has either opted out, or they haven't written a caption yet, and then there's one where they actually have written a caption. So that was confusing for me, because to me it seems like the X is like a cancel button, or like tapping that just because it's sectioned off that's going to do something. It's going to delete that user or something like that when I tap on it. So there's a couple things you can do about that. One is you can remove the red background and just have the X icon. You could make the entire strip red. I think it's really I would just recommend avoiding the sort of like box inside of a box type of layout. But other than that, I think this app looks really good. It's really clear and to the point, and it seems like a lot of fun. So I wanted to say before I close up was just another reference to the Windows Phone Design Bootcamp. A lot of the things that I talk about are recapped in more detail in these video series. So I recommend that you check it out. I know there's not a lot more time in the contest, but there's always more to learn, and I want to take advantage of all the content that's out there. So the contest, I believe the deadline for it is on Sunday, but we're going to continue doing design reviews. Just for anyone who wants to keep improving their app once it's on the store, whatever your situation is, you can continue submitting your apps. I think for the next month or so, we'll be continuing to post the dates on the website. So that's it.